For a long, long time, we've had this one go-to metaphor for our minds, the computer, right? It processes, it stores data, it runs programs. It's been useful, for sure. But what if that whole idea, as helpful as it's been, is actually holding us back? Today, we're going to dig into a much more dynamic and, frankly, more exciting way to think about the mind.
So let me just ask you straight up. Is your mind basically a fancy computer? You know, a biological one? We use the language all the time. We talk about processing our thoughts, storing memories, or even needing to reboot with a good night's sleep. But as we're about to find out, this analogy is really starting to show its age.
Okay, let's put these two ideas side by side, because this is where it gets interesting. The computer metaphor suggests our brain is fixed hardware, but we know that's just not true. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself. It's called neuroplasticity. A computer just runs programs someone else wrote. Your mind? It self-organizes, it evolves, and here's the biggest difference. A computer passively waits for input. Your mind is out there, in a constant dance with the world around you. It's not a machine, it's a living system.
So where's this idea of a living system even come from? Well, it's rooted in a really cool field called artificial life, or A-life for short. A-life studies systems that have all the properties of life, and you know what? Our minds check every single box.
And it's pretty wild when you look at it. Our minds exhibit all of these key principles. We adapt based on feedback, obviously. We self-organize. Complex thoughts just kind of pop up from the simple firing of neurons. No central programmer needed. We grow not just by learning facts, but by becoming more complex. Things like consciousness emerge from the whole system working together. And of course, our minds are autonomous. It really is less like a machine and more like a vibrant learning ecosystem.
So if the mind isn't running on code and logic gates, how does it actually work? Well, it operates by maintaining this beautiful, delicate balance between two powerful forces. It's a state that lets it be both stable and incredibly creative at the same time.
The first big idea here is something called metastability. The best way to think about it is like a spinning top. It's stable enough that it doesn't just fall over, right? But it's also constantly wobbling, exploring new positions, never getting stuck in one spot. That's your brain. It's always exploring a huge variety of mental states without getting locked into a single rigid pattern. It's the perfect sweet spot between being stable and being flexible.
And this amazing balance comes from two forces that are kind of pulling in opposite directions. On one hand, you've got integration. That's when different parts of your brain team up, working together to form a coherent thought. On the other hand, you have segregation, where specialized areas can just focus on their own specific job. Metastability is that constant, fluid dance between the two. It stops your mind from becoming too rigid or, just completely random. Now, the second concept is even cooler. It's called the edge of chaos. Picture building a sand pile, just adding one grain of sand at a time. The pile gets steeper and steeper until it hits this critical point, where the very next grain could cause a tiny little trickle or a massive avalanche. That state, perfectly poised, ready for literally anything, that's the edge of chaos. And it seems our brains love to hang out right there.
This chart really nails why that's so crucial. If your brain were too ordered, it would just be rigid, predictable, boring. You'd get stagnation. If it were too disordered, it would just be random noise, complete incoherence. But right there, in the middle, at the edge of chaos, that's where the magic happens. Your mind is at its most flexible, its most creative, its most powerful. It's the absolute best state for processing information and dealing with our crazy, complex world.
And get this isn't just some neat abstract theory. Research is actually showing that when our brains operate in this dynamic state, it's linked to real, tangible benefits. We're talking higher fluid intelligence, your ability to solve new problems, plus more creativity and a more open mind. This is literally the state where your mind comes alive.
Okay, so the mind is this dynamic system, dancing on the edge of chaos. That's all great, but how does it, actually think? How does it decide what to do and then learn from it? Well, it turns out, underneath all that beautiful complexity, there seems to be a very simple, fundamental rhythm, a universal loop of thought.
Cognitive scientists have come up with tons of super complex theories and models for how the mind works. But what's so amazing is that when you zoom out and look at them all, you start to see the same simple, elegant pattern showing up over and over again. It's like this foundational cycle that drives almost everything we do.
And here it is. It's called the cognitive cycle. It's so simple. First, you perceive the world around you. Then, you try to understand what's going on, matching it up with what you already know.
Next, based on that understanding, you select an action. And finally, and this is the most important part, you learn from what happened and you update your internal model of the world. This little loop is running constantly, whether you're making a cup of coffee or trying to solve a puzzle. It's the basic rhythm of thought.
All right, so this brings us to the big one, the million-dollar question. If the mind is just this dynamic system running on this simple cognitive loop, where in the world does consciousness, our own inner subjective experience, come from?
So the key insight here is that you have to stop looking for consciousness as if it's a thing. It's not some module in your brain you can point to. Instead, it's what we call an emergent property. It just arises from the incredibly complex, dynamic, integrated activity of the entire system we've been talking about. It's a property of the whole living system itself.
And some of the leading theories on this are just fascinating. For instance, attention schema theory says consciousness is basically the brain's model of its own attention. Or there's integrated world modeling theory, which suggests it's the feeling of being a coherent model of yourself in the world. See the common theme there? Consciousness seems to be all about the brain's amazing ability to build models, to represent itself and its own place in the universe.
This quote really just ties it all together so well. The fractal nature of consciousness, these beautiful, complex, self-repeating patterns. It connects our inner experience directly back to those dynamic states we were talking about earlier. The mind dancing at the edge of chaos, right where intelligence and awareness can truly flourish.
Okay, we have covered some huge ideas here. The mind as a living system, metastability, the edge of chaos, consciousness. Whew! So let's bring it all home and talk about why this new perspective isn't just a cool scientific idea, but why it's actually really empowering for you.
So what should you take away from all this? First, learning isn't like programming a computer. It's not about forcing data in. It's an organic, natural process of growth. Second, creativity isn't some magical gift that only a few people have. It's the natural state of a mind that is built to explore possibilities. And maybe most important of all, your mind is not a fixed, static machine. It is fundamentally, beautifully designed for adaptation and change.
So I really encourage you to let go of that old limiting metaphor. Your mind is not a piece of hardware that's just going to get outdated. It is a vibrant, dynamic, living system that is designed for continuous, lifelong growth. It is always, always becoming.
And that brings us to one final thought I want to leave you with. If your mind really is at its best when it's balancing between order and disorder, exploring that fertile ground right at the edge of chaos, what new, unexpected, and maybe even brilliant connections can you go out and make today?